One.
Hey, fellow GNTers, those of us like our spirituality with a twist. All right.
Whoa, you came in hot, man.
You gave me a weird count in. You're trying to fuck with me.
I am.
You're trying to screw my shit up. So I was like, I better
Yeah,
come in I better come in swinging.
yeah, that's right.
All right. So where are we at in this? We're talking about karma mudra, and that led to which is the use of pleasure, bliss, sexuality for spiritual practice.
Yeah.
And then we got an interesting question from a listener who was asking about different ways of thinking about bliss and spirituality. So we did a little thing to talk about that.
Yeah, shout outs to him because I know he's listening and he
Mhm.
responded again with this really wonderfully worded email and yeah, so we appreciate that because I do feel like the questions that we have got from our listeners, most of them, there was a couple that were not so hot, but most of them are are really intelligent, really well thought out, and I can tell that like it's not just that people are listening, that they're engaging with the material that we present, and that is a really great honor. And so we love those kinds of things. So we respond jin and tantra at gmail.com. I know I shouted out at the end, and we've been shouting it out for the last 4+ years, but jin and tantra at gmail.com, hit us up. We do respond, and if something is worth addressing, we will take an episode or sometimes more and try and think about what it is that you're asking.
Yeah, it was interesting in the last episode of this, if people get a chance to hear it, because it went in all kinds of directions that, we weren't necessarily like anticipating in the beginning,
Yeah.
right? We were kind of addressing this question of bliss, but there were other things to talk about, including like questions about religion in general. And so maybe that stuff will pop up along the way. We were talking like off mic before we started, like who knows where this one will go. So hopefully another lively and who knows where the fuck it'll go episode.
Mhm.
But we'll end up talking a little bit about carbon mudra. So we were really like, we're using Dr. Nita's stuff, who's a Tibetan doctor and also like a tantric teacher. We're kind of using his stuff as kind of the basis. And he poses this thing of going, well, what are questions people have about this? What are doubts people have about this? And he tries to address them. So we're kind of using that as our starting point to kind of talk about this stuff. When we've gotten like issues about like finding partners, choosing partners, which opens a whole door of just like how do you handle relationships in your personal life? Try to make it spiritual, try to make it meaningful. And so, anyways, we're kind of that's where we're at a little bit. And then maybe we'll talk a little bit about whether Karma Muja has patriarchal elements, but we'll see if other things pop up along the way. So for me, I just wanted to go just to pull us back to where we were. For me, if I were to boil my thoughts down on this, like deep down, and I wanted to throw this phrase out there because we're going to try to write our little book, 9 Things That Can Fuck Up Your Life. And I'm going to use this little phrase in there. So if I were to boil my thoughts on that, it would go something like this. I think we're all presented in our lives with special people to connect with in various ways. To me, I would call this probably like the Rumi principle. And I'll probably use that in our little discussions of 9 things that can affect your life. I believe this is like sincerely true. And this has been sort of part of our conversations, and there it is. I think this can happen in a variety of circumstances and conditions. It's not entirely controllable when these people appear. You and I both know that, Daniel. You never know when someone is going to appear in your life who might be someone who's meaningful. You don't know.
You have no idea.
You have no idea. It's like totally unpredictable, and it's just an act of the Tao or whatever you want to say,
Yeah.
or the Buddhist goddesses doing their magic. Tell God your plans, and he'll probably laugh at them. Isn't that the old line?
I believe that is the line.
Yeah. So wherever it appears, it'll appear. The principle to me, or the Rumi rule, you want to make it a little bit more alliterative, would be like, okay, you have to accept that these things appear where they appear and try to make the most of them, right? That's, I think, for me, while I thought the definitions of what we were calling karma mudra should be kind of broad,
Mm.
so going back like episodes ago, we had looked at ways in which people talk about levels of this kind of connection between people and how they may manifest. And so this was the idea, like sometimes they'll talk about smiling at someone, you connect in that way, communicating with someone, holding hands, kissing, embracing. So there's like levels of intimacy between people that can be there, right? And all of those can be spiritually transformative and meaningful, Not every relationship is going to be a sexual relationship, but other ones, that can be spiritually alchemical, right? And Dr. Nita's thing, he said, looking and watching the seeing of people, the talking and laughing with another person, the connecting in that way, sharing thoughts, ideas, emotions, hugging and touching, and then he finally gets to uniting. So either way, it's framed in four ways, right?
Mm,
And so for me, I thought, yeah, I was just thinking about this episode, and I thought, well, I wanted to say that because for me, that's sort of like so core to my ideas about this. I wanted to put that out there again for folks to really think about that, right?
mm-hmm,
So as we're going through our lives, we can make the most of those things when they appear,
mm.
recognize things and make the most of these things when they appear. And I think you and I both have some idea in us that it's a tragedy to let those things go un uncultivated or something, right? That is a tragic thing. You don't want to do that too much, right?
Yes.
Okay. And a certain level, going back to our little Esther Perel stuff around this, I think to me that constitutes almost a definition of uniqueness or something, right?
Sure.
It's kind of core to it. So, we talked about this sometime even back in 2023, and her name pops up occasionally in our conversations. She's the great kind of writer, relationship psychologist, clinical psychologist, like relationship kind of
Mm-hmm.
guru person. And she uses this language of exclusiveness for relationships that are maybe more like sort of traditional, and then relationships that more can be more untraditional, but in any case are based on the idea like there's something unique about my bond with this other person.
Yeah, I think the way we described it, which I use quite often, is that like the exclusive view of relationships is that the love exists because you and I are in a sealed container. And it's and that this love is exclusive to this thing right
Mhm.
now. And the uniqueness person views it as love probably, I'm being very general, right? But
Mhm.
love exists, period. And it comes out in these unique situations, i.e., my relationship with this one, my relationship with that one, my relationship with that one, and so on and so forth. And so, therefore, love probably is a little bit more mm, like a universal force. I don't mean to put high thoughts in people's minds, so let me, lower the
Well, no, you
bar.
definitely mean to put high thoughts in people's minds.
Well, I mean,
That's the
yes, but I
raison
mean,
d'etre.
I
Uh-huh.
guess I guess like to say just because you're a uniqueness person or an exclusive person,
Uh,
I'm not saying that like your view is of loves is limited because of that choice. I'm not, and I don't we don't like to counterpoint myself, but I want to make that distinction just for our conversation purposes.
okay, I got what you're saying, man.
But does
Yeah,
that make sense?
yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like these are not easy subject matters. It's been really interesting, and we were talking beforehand, and we had to have these conversations about like the authoritarian aspects of Christianity. We were talking about that, and it's painful. It's not easy to talk about these things.
Mm-hmm.
So, some of these things you're saying one thing, but you're also like, okay, I want to make sure I don't be too extreme about what I'm saying,
Right.
right?
Right.
Yeah, yeah. But you still got to say the thing. So, yeah, so I think, if I were to, as I think about it, some of our projects that we got ongoing, I would say, yeah, I'm going to use this Rumi rule idea because it does it pushes your envelope of things, right? And one of the things with the whole Rumi story, and for me, I've really tried to integrate that Rumi idea into my sort of core set of spiritual beliefs. Is like, when something is special, you recognize it and you act, right?
Right.
It's a little bit outside the box, even if you're covering outside the lines a little bit. That's the Rumi story, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but on the other hand, so I wanted to throw that out there. And again, I don't mind being the like uniqueness person in this particular podcast. I'm totally cool with it. And when it comes up, it'll come up and we'll talk about it briefly.
Right.
And, okay, so I'm cool with that. But I wanted to kind of bring that up. For me, the big thing would be maybe opening our eyes to like these four different levels and thinking, okay, I could have connections with people in different ways and they can have a certain amount of intensity and passion to them. Not everyone is going to be sexual, but that can be still
Right.
part of a karma mudra too. And that might be a way that we'll think about karma mudra under our karmic circumstances, right?
And what were
Our
some of the ones?
cultural circumstances.
What were some of the ones that you and Phaedra, shout outs to our Phaedra episode, the what was that called? Becoming the unicorn or something like this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, what were some of the ones that you had mentioned one like the sapiosexual and what were some of
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah. So the sapiosexual thing is when people feel like an intellectual connection,
yeah.
right? Or
Yeah.
people who like find intellectual connection like erotic, romantic,
Yes.
that's where their kick is, right?
Yeah.
That's where their trip is.
And what were some
I
of
mean,
the other ones?
and then demisexual is people who want the emotional connection. It's the
Mm,
emotions that drive them,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are some of the, the buzz phrases in the culture now.
Oh
But
yeah.
I think those words are handy, right?
Are there any more?
Um, no, I think those are the two ones that pop out most obviously. I think they're making this like I think the reason that those things came up is there's people who don't want to engage in sexual stuff unless they have those other criteria, right?
Got it. Requirements.
And yeah, I remember, having conversations with my daughter about this. She's now 22,
Yeah.
and it's hard like to know who she is exactly. She wouldn't mind me talking about this. She's as open as can be. Um, but it's not obvious who she is yet in terms of this part of her identity, but she's definitely looking for something deeper. And we had these kind of funny conversations about there's asexuality and demisexuals and sapios, like all this language is being tossed around a little bit. Maybe it's dying off somewhat, but I still think they're handy words.
I mean, what about people who dress up like babies? What are they called?
Well, that's a thing.
Okay.
That's a thing. I don't remember what the word for that is, but that's a thing.
Okay, all right.
I was listening to this mystery thriller, and that was like part of the whole story. They were trying to crack the case, and it was all these men kept coming out of this house, and it turned out they were all in there just to wear their diapers, and
Ah.
it was a major plot point recently. But in any case, yeah, that's a thing. I can't remember what the word for it is.
Yeah.
But I think this is like I think a lot things a lot of us can feel. And when I was talking with my daughter about it, she was like, "Well, she doesn't want to. She's not a casual sex kind of a person. I'm her dad, so I'm totally fine with that on some level, right?
Right. You're like, oh
But if
well,
she
no
wants,
problem.
if she wanted to be a casual sex person, that would be cool too. Whatever she wants to do, I'll back her play. She's her own being, doing her own thing. But we started like throwing these words around, sapiosexual, demisexual, these kinds of words. And yeah, I think she's still trying to figure out what describes her, but I think those words are handy. It gave her something to like kind of contemplate.
Yeah.
But I think like if that becomes true, because again, I think one of our goals in this is to make these things doable for people in the here and now, right?
Right.
And not everybody's going to be some poly karma mudra person, right?
Right.
That's not going to be appropriate for everybody's lives. But there's other ways you can engage in examples of this that still fit into those ideas, right? I can still be close and have something that's, get a spiritually alchemically meaningful relationship.
Hold
Yeah.
on. I know this is very random. I never understand when is the appropriate time to use Pollyannish.
Well, Pollyanna has to do with people who are naive.
Okay, all right, there we go. I didn't, when you said Polly, that was the first thing that came to my head was Pollyann, and I was like,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I don't think that fits here, but like whatever. I
Yeah, yeah,
guess I'm
yeah.
being Pollyannish.
That's a little naive.
Hmm. All right, perfect. There we go.
But so yeah, so polyamory.
Uh-huh.
People get confused about those words though. That's true. If you were to do a semantic thing, because I've had conversations with people and they're like, people are polygamous. And you're like, well, no,
I
that's like
know.
having multiple wives if you're a Mormon or something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, we're
That's
not
not the
doing the
same.
legal. We're not
That's
doing
not
the
the
legal
same
thing. I
thing.
didn't even know her birthday. What are you talking about getting married, you know?
That's a different deal. So
Yeah.
people got that all that jargon. Yeah, and then we did
Yeah.
have the episode with Pedro. We were talking about some of that language, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, but it like opens the door for people to be able to have some of these karma mudra experiences, maybe in situations where otherwise it wouldn't be accessible to them, because
So
of their relationship situation and so on.
so essentially
I think it's going to be poly.
what you're saying is that what we're doing, which I guess I didn't realize that you were doing this, but is that karma mudra as a practice of union, often sexual, we'll use this word specifically, that like the term sexuality doesn't have to be physical in nature, it doesn't have to be penetrative in nature, that sexuality has other branches to it, i.e., sapiosexual, demisexual, like, and you're opening up you're removing the kind of like uh constant of physical intimacy as linked to sexuality, or sort of decoupling those and saying sexuality is an umbrella term that has these other pieces along with it. And so one could engage essentially in a karma mudrik practice with somebody, even if they were not in a physically intimate relationship.
Well, it might not be the karma mudra like, the full-on sexually penetrated karma mudra. We can have that as its own
Sure.
deal. But, I remember talking with like a very interesting friend of mine, one of the quirkiest dudes I've ever met in my life. Though you fit with that too, Daniel, and I'll say that I'm quirky too. We're
No.
a trio of quirksters, if I think
Okay.
about the three of us, in the best sense of the word,
I've never heard
right?
the term corkster before, but okay.
You're gonna have to own it.
Yeah, that's right.
But in any case, I had a conversation with him. He was like, well, sometimes that partner is somebody you meditate with, and
Yes.
there's a lot of sexual energy with that person, but
Yes.
maybe you're never sexually intimate in the fully, penis vagina sense, but there's still a lot of sexual energy being exchanged between you and that person, and that's a thing, you know? And I guess that fits under me like the Rumi rule in the sense that you can go, okay, we're Rumi and Shams of Tabriz. If you don't know the whole Rumi story, we've told it at different times, but he was this really well-respected madrasa religious figure who all of a sudden has his whole life turned upside down when this traveling mystic enters into his world, and they end up with this very intense, very intimate relationship. Were they sexual with one another? Who knows? The tradition says no, like we said multiple times, but there was something intense happening between them. And I suppose, like, I was interested in your opinion because I think what I'm trying to get across here is that, maybe that's sometimes the way this will be. But if we open up the doors to those kinds of experiences, we can get a wider range of people using the
Yeah.
bonds that they have, the karmic bonds that they have being used in ways that
Yeah.
people can feel comfortable with,
So
whatever
this,
that
yeah.
means.
So this is as an extension of your initial point of the Rumi rule, the double R as we call it here.
Yeah.
But we never called it that before. But that like the opportunity that the sort of opportunity that presents itself upon a karmically charged meeting of two people to be transformative and or meditative, or maybe we could say meditative and then transformative, um, is not limited to just sexuality because sexuality is a sort of an acknowledgement of a connection between people that can be alchemized, built upon, and then expanded, or yeah, expanded to provide opportunities for growth, learning, life change, all like enlightenment activities.
Yeah, I think that's I mean, I like the way you were talking about too before as well. Like your sexuality is bigger,
Yes,
than just, having your genitals touch another person's orifices in a certain way.
which is fun.
Good times. Hmm. And
Yes.
yet, you can make it broader if that is something that can
Yeah.
work between people. And maybe that would be, whatever is right between the two people, they can decide for themselves. But if we make it bigger, I think we have more things that are going to be available to more people. I think
Yeah.
that's part of my goal.
Yeah. No,
It's a
I
bit,
understand that.
there's an old Prince song where he talks about that.
What's it called?
It's something like,
Little Red Corvette.
no, not that one. It's more of a deep cut.
Purple Rain.
That's not a deep cut. That's like the most popular one ever.
Caribbean Queen.
That's Billy Ocean. But our hearts are beating as one, Daniel. And I did say that we're sharing the same dream.
Yes.
But when you look at, he says something like, we don't have to, we don't have to, whatever level he talks about it. I'm forgetting the exact letter, but he says
Yeah,
something
yeah,
like, we don't have to, like, I don't have to be inside of you for us to make love. We don't even necessarily have to take our clothes off.
right.
Sometimes it's like there's an intensity that, which when I went back and I thought about the karma mudra stuff and these different levels, I was like, yeah,
Yeah,
sometimes karma mudra between two people is smiling or holding hands or,
yeah.
seeing that person or talking and laughing or hugging or touching, the things that are before what we would say are the more conventional sexual activities, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I guess my goal in this for me was like to make it bigger,
yeah.
let's expand that out. Even in like the Freud world and stuff, when they would use the word libido, they didn't always just mean, you know, sexual intimacy in that sense. They meant something that was bigger, right? Let's make libido a bigger thing,
Well,
right? To be more
it's
inclusive.
interesting,
I like the
Eric.
idea in any case. Yeah.
It's interesting because I think what we're talking about, and the way that I see this, the kind of Rumi rule, if you want to use that again, is that like the universe or whoever will present opportunities, and based on the recognition of the people in those moments, then the opportunity could seem like something that you can't miss, and something that you might pass over. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? And so it's up to you, like you said, to recognize that that's something. But in the bigger point and more, related to what we're saying right now is that you're kind of honoring this unspoken bond or this unspoken feeling that's alive, there's a resonance between both people. And that like if there's energy there for communication, then that communication can be through a variety of mediums. And sometimes it's the recognition of that intensity that you can, ride on essentially. And I know we just said it maybe like 6, 7 minutes ago, but you can, and we're refining it. So, that's why you can use that potential, right? Because it's powerful when there's, when there's some, we call it chemistry or sexual energy or the presence of Shakti or hormones or libido, right?
Mhm.
Is that you have this potential that you want to do something with some kind of energy. And I keep doing this thing with my hands for those who are watching, it's like this bubbling.
Try to
Um,
get the feeling of it. Yeah.
yeah, but you're essentially, you want to do something with the energy that's inside. You're like, okay, I want to do this thing. Now, oftentimes that energy is wanting, to be experienced, to be transformed into pleasure. And therefore you choose orgasm, right? Now, hopefully you choose your partner gets one too, but not often. Sometimes you just like, no, I want this for
We
me.
all do the best we can.
We tried. I tried, but you're saying that, there's a multitude of ways that you can actually interact with that energy if you're not attached to a particular outcome and you have this kind of karma mudra mindset, again, which should be probably a hashtag trending on what used to be Twitter. Um, right.
No more Twitter.
No more Twitter,
Yeah.
right? Not at all.
Yeah.
But hashtag karma mudra mindset, which is I'm going to take my energy, the other person's energy, and our relationship together and weave it towards something that transcends both of us, but requires each of us.
Yeah, you know what? I totally agree. And I think that's what I'm trying to get to in a way to make this doable for people in a way. And
Yeah.
if we get back to Dr. Nita's point, I don't have his little book with me today. I bought some other ones, depending on how far we get. Bought some other little props for the
Oh,
video
oh,
thing,
oh, okay.
literary props. But in any case, he's making a point that's very, I think we both agree with, and we don't need him to like to think this, but he does say it, which is like there's parts of the deeper parts of the energetic system. He uses this fancy Tibetan tantric terminology of the fig leaf, right? The drops, the subtle drops within the subtle channels within the chakras, right?
Yeah.
That really affect our minds. But he kind of makes the point that those inner parts of the whole tantric system, what they call the Vajra body, and we'll do a whole deal with that when we get to the part of talking about that because we're doing karma mudra, so that'll be a thing to do. But like those parts of the inner person will resonate with another person very strongly,
Yeah.
right? And there's just special connections between people. They're just a thing, you know. And it's really like the point he's making is it's something deep inside the two people that are resonating with one another.
Yeah.
So for those opportunities not to be lost to us, and it's essentially a non-tantric culture. Let's be honest, right? This is
With
not
this
a
one.
tantric culture.
This one.
This one, right?
Oh, okay. Yeah. I'm trying to find out what we are as opposed to.
Yeah, we're stumbling along towards something. But it's a Judeo-Christian culture. It's not a tantric culture. There are tantric cultures on the planet, but this isn't one. You
No.
know,
No.
so if you're gonna like to try to get like a tantric vibe and philosophy out, we're gonna have to see how we make this fit into what's available and doable within our culture, which is very different. You know,
Yeah.
if you were in a like Tibetan world, they might say, well, yeah, of course you're gonna be sexual with that person, but that might not always be appropriate in our culture, right?
Right.
But you also don't want the opportunities to be totally lost. So I guess in my mind, I'm trying to spread this out. And I
Sure.
think that's the Rumi rule, as far as I can tell. So okay, cool. I wanted to obviously we didn't talk about this ahead of time. It's very clear at this point in the conversation, but we like to spring things on one another.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think we understand each other with this, and I think
Yeah.
there's a value in this to make this big. If it's sexual, cool. If it's not, there's other ways to use those energies that
Sure.
might be more appropriate between the two people.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was one of the things I had kind of lingering in this personally, and then
If
the
and Eric,
yeah,
if other people and I'm deadly curious on this. So if people have these kinds of experience where you have consciously, or even we'll say unconsciously, but retroactively, we're able to reflect and say, oh, we did something with that. If anybody has the experience of this, of using the sexual bonds or the intimate connections between you and somebody else, um, to do something with it. I don't know if that's a little bit vague, but like to have that energy be present in a potentially non-sexual way for positive change. We would certainly, I'd love to hear those stories. I mean, we don't necessarily have to share them on the episode unless someone would like. We will if you would like
Mhm.
that, but definitely hit us up, ginandtantra@gmail.com. Like that would be a very interesting exploration of this because I know I've done it
Mhm.
personally. If you want a Daniel story, I'll give you one. Um, I was supposed to go on a blind date with somebody. This is some years ago. Okay. I was supposed to go on a
Okay.
blind date with somebody, and she was gonna meet me for drinks at this restaurant, which is closed, but it's in like Wicker Park, somewhere over there. This is in Chicago for our international listeners. So a little kind of a slight, not upscale, but nicer area in Chicago. So she was gonna meet me after dinner for a drink at the bar. Well, at this point, she's like a half hour late, 45 minutes late, an hour late. I, I'm like, whatever. I only hung around because I was talking to the manager, who was an attractive Italian lady who, we exchanged phone numbers, and I told her I could do some like energy work on her, But we had very good chemistry, but like I knew what my role was. My role wasn't to like do anything else. I just was gonna do that. But we definitely felt this bond. And so I won't go into it because I have told this story before on here. But I will say that like understanding that connection between us and having such a high amount of tension and then focusing that energy back towards her betterment, even though we worked together only a few times, it was a very, very deep connection, very deep healing for her. This was the woman who I haven't told the story for a while, but when I put my hands on her, I saw a younger girl in a car being essentially, like physically assaulted by an older gentleman, and that woman ended up being her mother, which she never knew about, but she was sort of carrying in her body. So what I'm saying is that, like, yes, I have some, abilities to do that kind of a thing, but that accuracy, that specificity to describe her teacher's face, her what a middle school teacher's face, and know the circumstances around it. Like I don't get that kind of specificity, and just using this opportunity to kind of coalesce my own memories, I can definitely put back, that I can put that all together and say, yeah, and for sure, we intentionally used the energy of our connection towards her betterment, and so that is my story. So I hope to get some listeners as well.
Yeah, I remember you telling that one now. I kind of remembered the beginning and I remembered the end, but I didn't remember how that connected together. But I remember like, oh yeah, I remember that whole thing because it was this shamanic moment for you of like just
Yeah.
kind of seeing through the familial lineage or something
Yes.
to the ancestral trauma.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think yeah, that was a powerful one. Yeah. I've been in that kind of situation too, where like you can be really like I guess that's the point. The energy can be somewhat malleable, right?
Yes. Totally.
There's a malleable quality to it, and some of it can be sexual tension and things like that, but some of it can, it's energy,
Yes.
right? And the energy can be worked with, right? Which is tantra.
Yeah.
Hello, right?
Hello.
Yeah. So, yeah, I've been in that situation too, especially like I've known people who've been victims of sexual violence,
Yes, as
and
a
it's been shared. And, in this case, I'm talking about, women that I've known, cis hetero women,
yeah.
and who are victims of violence from men. And at times you're able to there's some connection with the person, but you're also be able to be a safe person for them too. And that's can be very healing, right? Sometimes that's been in a professional capacity, as our clinical
Yes.
work, like
Yeah.
officially
Yeah.
I'm on the job. And sometimes it's been people I've known in my life who've been hurt. And you're like, okay, I'll be a male presence in your life,
Yes.
you know, sapio, deme, we're intellectually close, we're emotionally close.
Yes.
There's some love of some kind between the
For
two people. That's
sure.
an energy, right? Love is an energy. And but you're also to be able to be a safe person for that person.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of one person in particular, and you know, uh, we're not as close as we used to be, but we knew each other very well back in our 20s. And I was one of the first people she shared this with. Ultimately, when we got to be closer, I did some body work. as I was learning my bodywork things
Yeah,
through
yeah,
my
yeah,
Zen training, and that was kind of good. And to be a place where touch can be safe was powerful.
yeah.
And then when we talked about it afterwards, she was very much like, she told like ultimately that her husband, right? She was telling him like, yeah, this person was really important, in this case, me, right? Because I was a figure that could be there in this part of her life where she was really
Mm-hmm.
hurt.
Mm-hmm.
That could be that safe, healing presence, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's doable.
And randomly, but like I want to just give props to anybody who has dealt with sexual trauma in their life. I don't know why this is coming to me, but whoever's listening to this that needs to hear this, like, the fact that you went through that and you made it through that and you're a functioning person, that has a sexual relationship and it's, I mean, like that is such like an amazing healing process. And I know that we work with it professionally. We definitely have seen this in the clinic before. We've seen it in friends. I mean, we've seen it on this podcast, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah.
Joni Osborne talked about that, whatever, a couple of years ago when we did our series
Yeah,
on,
yeah, yeah.
that. And so
Very
very,
powerfully, actually.
very,
Very
yeah,
powerfully.
absolutely, absolutely. And so we thank her for sharing and we don't need emails on that, but I just want to just give
Deep, deep
yeah,
props to people.
deep
Yeah.
props to those people who have to go through that healing because it is a part of your being, for sure. And so as we're kind of talking about like the sort of sexual gravitas here at this point, that the sort of gravitational field around our connections to other people in a sexual manner and its various permutations, as you had mentioned, it's not a little thing. It's not a little thing to be shamed or stifled or assaulted in that way because it is a very natural part of being a human being.
Yeah, it's like kind of getting to almost like the foundation of who you are in a
Yeah,
Chinese medical sense too. It's an
yeah,
assault on, like we do Chinese medical theory occasionally, but the pelvis is where kind of the like sometimes uses where Jing, the essence of the person is, their constitutional core,
yes.
right? And so it's getting attacked at some very core thing, obviously. Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
One of
Mm-hmm.
the things I do say with students, and then the last thing we'll say about that because it's such a deep subject matter, but I do try to get it across with students that like our culture now is trying to make strides to make this more conscious on this, to make this more healing. Are we
Yeah,
doing perfect? No, we're not. We can look around at the culture now and say we are not. Very clear.
yeah.
But at least in terms of the clinical work, the healing aspects of things, the people in the healing professions, I think it's really people are trying to be honest, trying to make more resources available for people, trying to make this a more accepting and healing space for people who need that kind of healing. I mean, we are
Mm-hmm.
making progress. I point out to students like you're not going to find this in the traditional Chinese medical literature. They're not going to talk about this because they weren't able to acknowledge it, right? It wasn't like that
Yes.
wasn't happening. They
Right.
just didn't have the cultural resources to do that.
Yes.
And there's parts of the culture now we're not we're not doing as well as we should. We won't dwell on it, but we're not doing as well as we should. But on the other hand, we are doing better in some ways to like make it where people can share some of these things,
Yeah. Yeah.
get support and healing and support other people who need to go through their own healing things
Yeah.
too. So
There's acknowledgement for sure.
yeah, it's starting to happen, right? Okay. All right. So that was the one thing I was talking about with this, right? And
Mhm.
as I said, I'm totally fine with being the uniqueness person in this thing, advocating for some of these uniqueness positions. That's totally fine with me. But the other thing I wanted to talk about was like, okay, if I'm looking at this from the point of view of, okay, I'll be the uniqueness person, but we're talking about for more exclusiveness folks, how do you integrate this into your life? You know, given that whatever the circumstances of your life are, which is kind of like the underlying theme of this conversation for today,
Yeah.
right? And so for me, I just had some thoughts, and I'll be curious to hear what your thoughts are too, Daniel, and we'll kind of pick it apart.
Yeah.
But certainly, there are people that we know who are practicing with significant others with a spouse. That can happen if you get the two people who are right together, right? And I invited on, one of the tantra couples that I know. I won't give them by name now because they haven't fully committed, and I don't want to like do that yet.
Yeah.
But you and I know who we're talking about,
Yeah.
right? And I thought maybe we talk to them kind of separately, and then maybe kind of do a joint episode if they wanted to kind of share because they're out
Yeah.
in the community doing a lot of good work. But I actually like I don't know what the nature, and I don't maybe it's private for them, but I'm almost curious. I don't know the entire like what their relation is like. I don't know if they're exclusiveness or unique because I actually don't know, you know. But there are a couple practicing. So you can have that, right? And we know people who do that. One of the things that they said that was interesting is sometimes they would engage in sexuality just for the pleasure of it, just for the relationship, just for
Right,
the
right.
rhythm of it. And sometimes they would be doing that for spiritual connection, spiritual growth, right? And it was almost something they would decide almost beforehand, before they go into a session that where they were going to knew they were going to be intimate with one another,
Yeah,
intimate moments. And they'd be like, okay, well, maybe we're doing this today, maybe we're doing that today. And I thought that was some good advice, right? That they kind of
I
shared.
agree. Yeah.
Um, and then what occurred to me from what we were saying before, what also hit me, if you happen to have that kind of bond with another person that's of that type, and they are your significant other, you know, then a lot of the other aspects of the four levels of this will probably be more naturally there anyways, right? It won't just be a sexual thing. You'll have the joy of the laughing and the talking and the kissing and the seeing each other and, you know, all those other aspects, right?
Yeah.
So you'll have probably, you know, potentially have that more full thing. Okay. So, I mean, that struck me and that was worthwhile saying. But I also wanted to be honest about this. We're planning on doing a retreat kind of based on aspects of meditating on sexual and things and bliss and things like that. And
No,
if you're
yeah,
totally
it's happening for sure.
yeah, it's happening.
Yeah.
So, you know, to be honest, it's not that all relationships have that component to it. They really don't. You know, if we're going to be like totally honest about this,
Yeah.
we try to be honest. So, you know, if we're really honest about it, not all, or probably not even many relationships are built on sort of these psychospiritual grounds. They're just not,
I
you
would
know.
I would guess that most are not really. I mean, in order for them, at least from my view, in order for them to be built on these things, someone, or at least one, but probably both people, have to be practitioners of some psychospiritual thing and then want to consciously carry that into the relationship. And therefore, the other person has to be at least aware of that so that they can agree or disagree with something that they are familiar with. And I mean, I don't know how many legit psycho spiritual, and maybe we could say it the other way, spiritual psycho people, because I like the spirit, I like the spirit to lead with it, right? But that
Mhm.
like I don't know how many practitioners are engaged in that. I don't know how many people are engaged in a legitimate practice. And this is, no shade to like new age type movement, but I'm just, having been around this, maybe a little bit more than you have in the past, Eric. I don't know. We haven't talked about it totally over the years, but I've been around a lot of that, you
You
know?
talk about new agey things.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, okay, yeah, yeah.
I've been around a lot of it. And sometimes there's people who do really good work. Everybody's heart, I believe, not everybody, but most people's hearts are in the right place, not assuming people who are taking advantage. Um, but that the problem with that, like things that are new agey, is that like they're all little doorways to traditions where that information was taken from.
Mhm.
But they don't often tell you where they came from. They'll just say, here's this thing, try these things, but those things came from somewhere. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know if those people they can totally enter into a conscious communion with someone else for sure, but I don't know if what you're talking about is that kind of like bringing in psychospirituality into the relationship as an idea of being aware of your energies, behaviors, and actions as a conscious couple, if we could use that terminology,
Mhm.
versus practicing tantra or practicing karma mudra or even kama sutra as a conscious means to intermingle and experience higher states of ecstasy based on a particular practice or practices.
Yeah, I don't know if I was thinking about the new age thing, but it's cool that you bring it up, right? I don't think I even got to that place in my mind, you know. But I hear what you're saying, you know.
Yeah.
For me, I was like, again, just trying to be honest, and we did a lot of these episodes on nine things that can fuck up your life, and it's a, you know, little book project that we're chipping away at each at our own pace on this, you know.
Yeah.
But which could be faster
Oh man,
for both of us. We can call ourselves out, but we're doing it.
definitely.
Um, but like to me, if I'm really honest about it, I think most of these kind of, if I look at the people that I know, most of the relationships are probably built on much more pragmatic grounds, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just the reality of things, right? You
Yeah.
know, people, that's not undermined to undermine what people feel about one another, but they're kind of pragmatic things, you know. And there's a person that you feel like you want to build a certain kind of life with, right? And so, that's how these things tend to form, right? It's just the reality of it, right?
Hmm.
And it's not, it's just the truth of this, and they're not necessarily the kind of psycho-spiritual things at the core. Occasionally happens, but oftentimes it isn't. So it raises this weird question of like, to my mind, so then what do you do, right?
Hmm.
If you start to find yourself being drawn to something and you have this connection with another person that could be very meaningful to you. You might have invested a lot of time and a lot of energy. I'm actually like thinking of patients and people that I know, and I'm sure you can too.
Yeah.
When you start thinking about this, right? People put a lot of themselves into something, maybe years and years into something, and they're like, okay, and there's still an element where that they value the person. It's not that they don't, but you know, you're in a different headspace, right? So sometimes those relationships may end. We can say that could be true. But in other situations, maybe they're not going to end, right? And so then
Yeah.
what does someone do? It's very interesting. So I just wanted to try to
Yeah.
talk honestly about that. And
Yeah.
so the reality is, someone's significant other may not want to meet you there. They just may not be in that headspace.
Yeah.
They
Totally.
are. It happens a lot, right? And you're around any clinical work, I teach, we're around
Yes. Yes.
psychospiritual people. This is happening all the time, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
a lot, yeah,
Yeah.
it's a real thing.
It's a real thing.
Yeah.
You know, here's the thing. If somebody, from my experience, if somebody values the relationship, and I know it's more complicated than this, but I just try to boil it down to the deepest part. If somebody really values their partner really deeply, and that partner is like, I need you to begin a meditation practice. We need to communicate differently. We have to talk on a more subtle level as opposed to always cleaning up messes, right? We need to work together consciously with awareness and mindfulness to unwind some of the patterns, some of the attachments, and some of the aversions in order so that we don't have to continue to do that. So we can actually build a relationship as opposed to patch a relationship, you know? And I'll be honest, I've only seen that maybe twice with someone
Mhm.
who is into a practice, someone who begins a practice of whatever, and then the other person doesn't just tolerate it, but actually makes changes on their own accord because they want to. But I think it's because deep down, that other person, that their relationship meant so much to them that they're like, oh shit, they're serious. I had better do this thing, and then actually like went in and took the blue pill or the red pill or whatever pill. Took
Whichever,
all the
yeah.
fucking pills.
Lawrence Fishburne gave you a pill and you took the right one.
You
Yeah.
said give me both. Give me both.
I can't remember the name of his character, Lawrence Fishburne. I can't.
Morpheus.
Morpheus. Yeah. Yeah. Kaiser Sohe was the name I couldn't come up with in the previous episode. No one cares.
Yeah,
I
no.
watched The Usual Suspects. Oh, come on, Daniel. I cared. No, The Usual Suspects. It's Kaiser Soze. Anyways, it doesn't matter. But that bugged me afterwards. What the
Okay.
fuck was the name of that character? So yeah, I think that's possible, right? That can happen if you're more of a uniqueness person, but a lot of these things aren't going to be that way. Well, you just
Yeah.
find somebody else that you can connect with.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like the way it is sometimes in the world of kink, right?
Ooh.
Sometimes it's like, okay, I'm kinky, this other person isn't. Well, I'll find a different person that I can explore my kink with, and I'll have
Yeah.
my other, like you can do these things.
Yeah.
But I mean, realistically speaking, that's probably not going to happen for a lot of folks. We're an exclusivist culture.
We are.
Yeah, and people don't like it.
They
And
don't
they
because
don't
they're
like,
jealous.
they're jealous,
They
which
are
as we talked
definitely
about in
jealous.
Karma Muja, it's a pettiness.
Yes.
Um,
You have to get over pettiness for sure.
it's a previous episode when we were talking about the qualities of tantric personalities.
Yeah.
But, like if you want to be real about this, okay, and this can be, sexual jealousies, but even we have the whole emotional infidelity thing.
Yeah.
I don't like it. People don't like it.
Nope.
Um, Esther Perel's reaction, just to kind of trot her out a little bit, is really fascinating because I watched one of the interviews with her and she's like, emotional fidelity, can believe people came up with this shit. She's kind of just stunned at the
Right.
whole
Yeah.
notion of it. But
Yeah.
anyway, it's part of the culture. It's a deep part of the culture, and it's just how it is. So maybe you can go and get someone to join you in this space, like you're saying. Maybe if someone really feels like, okay, this is important for the relationship and this person, I'll bend in that way. I think that does happen, but oftentimes it won't, right? I think it's very hard to like drag someone spiritually into something that they don't want to do. I just don't know if that tends to
No,
work. Just
no.
doesn't tend to be a thing. And it's interesting why that isn't the case, but a lot of times it just isn't. It's just not in that person's range of who they are, and they're probably not going to do it, you
Well,
know?
it's a matter of a motivating factor, you know? Internal motivating factors are at least in my purview, um, infinitely more strong than those of an external motivating factor. Now, you can internalize an external motivational factor for sure. Okay, so what are we talking about? Well, I'll make it more practical. If you will, and I'll use something that I'm familiar with. If you want to lose weight for you because somebody made fun of you and you were not in the starting varsity or whatever, you're doing this for yourself. Now, you could say that the outside world is external, but I'm saying that no one told you, right? You did it for you internally. You're now driven. This is it. Versus someone saying, hey, you should do this because it's not healthy or whatever. They're going to have to find a way to get inside. You know
Yeah,
what I'm
I get what
saying?
you're saying.
Um, so yeah, so it's very difficult to like internally motivate somebody via the external to become spiritually inclined. And your motivation for leading a psycho-spiritual existence has to be, I believe, a very strong motivational factor, i.e., I'm going to put those two things together, is that you have to be internally motivated for this. Now, again, high psychedelic experience, high dose psychedelics can shake the shit out of you and make you believe or whatever. Near death experience. I've been using this terminology lately, so I'm glad I get a chance to use it. If you
Okay.
want to if you want to make change as an adult, I think these are the ways. Psychedelics make an opening. Near death experience makes an opening. The birth or death of somebody makes an opening. And I'm also throwing in now because of our tantric influence, Eric, lots of strong orgasms. Those are the four that'll do it, you know?
Well,
Um,
sometimes like you talk about like, this is the opposite of fun, but it just hit me, like the strong. I'm sorry, did you have more on the strong
no, you're
orgasm thing?
good.
Okay.
You're good.
I was just to say the other thing is like if something really harsh happens, the death of a person, the loss of a relationship, the collapse
Yeah.
of a business. So it's either going to be the reason I bring it up is because you can go the pleasure route or you can go the other route.
Yeah.
Our argument is let's go the pleasure route.
Let's go
Let's
the
go that.
pleasure route. Yeah. Yeah.
Let's go the strong orgasm route as opposed to like my shit fell apart route.
Yeah, which is much harsher, more suffering, but it's hard to change people and especially to move them towards a psycho-spiritual life. So if a partnership can do that, then that's great. And if that partnership is for a short period, like the kind of the crux of this episode, or from a karmic meeting,
I
wonderful.
don't think it
Whatever.
has to be a short period. I don't know if I think that has to be
Well,
short.
right, maybe not
I'm not
necessarily
thinking of it
short.
that way. I don't think it has to be short. It
Okay,
just
I guess
depends
I
on
can
whether you
say
can make it short or not short,
based on an opportune meeting. We'll say it this way.
Yeah, yeah. But I don't think those, well, maybe that's a point we'll have our own opinions on, but I don't think those things have to be short.
No, 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 they don't necessarily have
Mhm.
to be.
Yeah, I think, it depends on how you want to structure your life.
Sure,
But
yes.
I do get the idea, like, if I go back and we're trotting out some of our greatest hits in this, but I do think a lot about like the Carl Jung. Well, first of all, Carl Jung has that thing like, if you don't get ahead of this, life is going to catch you. Get ahead of it.
Yeah.
Get ahead of
Yeah.
the flow of life. Don't wait for it to bowl you over and then you change. Jump out ahead.
Yeah.
Right. So it's good advice. But we had talked about this a little bit in India and a little bit Jung has something that kind of echoes this, where you can kind of talk about people kind of being in different headspaces.
Yeah.
You know, some people are struggling just to get by, and for them, success is you get to something stable.
Yeah.
Some people are really, they've established a stable life for themselves, but there's dangers of it, as Jung points out, getting stagnant or stuck, and then you have to like transform yourself. And that's almost the indication that it's time for me to go forward.
Yeah.
I need to transcend more. I need to get outside of the norms. I need to start going to something deeper. right? And then eventually you get to things where you're probably going to things that are very deeply psychospiritual. So four kinds of folks, you know. But if someone's like kind of a type two kind of person, right? If that's their headspace, it's kind of hard to drag them along.
That's
You
what they
know,
make insulin for.
yeah. They're trying to regulate their blood sugar, but it's probably dopamine, Daniel. We probably have to do dopamine and serotonin shit on them. But it's
Yes.
just kind of the way people are. So then what do you do? And one of the things I wanted to point out, as we kind of get maybe the last 10 minutes of what we're doing here or
Yeah.
something, like it might be hard to drag someone along and it just may not work that way.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, then maybe what happens is your solo practice becomes the more important thing for you,
Mm.
right? And I've gone to a lot of these retreats where it's like the person's just there. They have a significant other at home. We were on a retreat where that happened a lot too. The significant other isn't there. They're down, they're there, they're doing their solo thing, right? And that's their practice. And it doesn't have to do with maybe their partner who maybe isn't in that headspace. They're not that kind of person, but that might be a thing to try to do, you know. And as I thought about that, I was going, okay, yeah, you can do that, the
Yeah,
solo meditative aspect. Mhm.
I've seen that before. It seems a little difficult, but maybe not. Maybe that's you know, they're
Well, I
not
mean, I guess
sapiosexuals.
I just was thinking like it's just the reality of what human life is. And again, we're trying to make this real so we can do these things.
Sure.
And for some people, this might be how it is. My partner doesn't, it isn't their thing. And, this might be more my solo thing.
Right.
Yeah. And we're going to be doing exercises ultimately we're talking about Karma Mutra. We'll be presenting meditations where you're working on your own internal energies, right? Trying to
Yeah.
generate blisses within yourself. That might be the way this will be for you, right? And that will be sort of more the solo aspect of your practice.
So
And yeah, go ahead.
yeah, so just to, prelude, because we're gonna be doing our retreat March 5th through March 9th, out here in the Midwest area, just about an hour outside of Chicago. We'll get that up pretty next couple of weeks. We'll have all the information up, and we'll do a little video on it. We'll kind of describe what we're going to be doing. But some of the practices that we'll be working with are some that I learned from my teacher Andre, and I'll tell you, some of the people who were there, and Eric, you and I have never talked about this before. Some of the practitioners who were there who did this practice had specifically said, like, I have sex with my partner because it's good for our relationship, but I don't really necessarily need that in my life at this
No,
time.
you and I talked about a little bit about that.
Yeah.
And like it was, some of the people there, I think a couple of the ladies there you were talking about that was sort of their feeling,
Yep.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think what happens there is you can learn to generate kind of the bliss within yourself
Yep.
as your own practice. And then that way you go forward. And if another person isn't able to meet you there, but you're still going to hang on to that relationship is still core to who your life functions, to who
Yeah.
you are. That's another way to do this. My thoughts around that, and I'm curious of your opinions as we kind of get to this. I wanted to talk about this part too, because we want to be real, right?
Yeah.
So I was just kind of like, well, you might have to change aspects of your relationship to sexuality and connection will probably change as you do these practices, like the people you're talking about from the retreats you were doing. Your attitude to what sexuality is, your attitude towards connection changes.
Yeah.
It might not be always easy for a partner who knew you before then to adjust to that.
Mm-hmm.
That's fair to say. You might have to be the more flexible person and adjust back to them, you know,
Yeah.
given that their approach to relationships and sexuality just isn't in that same space as where you are now,
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's just something that you have to be realistic and just think about that that's a reality, right?
Mm-hmm.
And almost what you're talking about with the people that you were discussing this with, well, I do this thing because it keeps me connected with this person and keeps them happy in the relationship, right? But my inner world is going to someplace else. This is the reality of my life, and I think there can be situations like that. And it still opens possibilities for you to do
Yeah, your thing.
some of the psychospiritual growth that you want,
Yeah.
even using the sexuality, even with the connection that is, the person isn't there in that space for you, you know, and that's just reality of things. So, I mean, we can imagine now like lots of permutations, I think, in my mind. We're clinicians, right? So I try to think, okay, what are the permutations of these cases? How is this going to play out for different people in different ways? And how do you get the best out of these things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in some ways, this might be what's realistic for some folks, right? But I think there has to be an understanding like, well, my relationship to sexuality, connection, what things mean, may be different now. It's not the same as this other person. Maybe that
Mm.
relationship doesn't last, or maybe it lasts, and then you adjust to that.
Yeah.
You kind of understand, okay, well, part of my life is how I'm being with this person, and another part is like more my own internal growth, something that's more private in my own, right? Kind of
Hmm.
like the people you were talking about on the retreat. Yeah.
Hmm.
I think it is realistic to wrap on the Esther Perel thing. This is like a deep question. This is like her book is called Mating in Captivity, right? So she really talks about like how do people hold their things together in long-term ways in the exclusiveness world, right?
Hmm.
Where, you know, it's not easy to hold these things together all the time, right? People burn out on each other or they grow apart in ways, right?
Yes.
But if you have the motivation to like spiritually work on yourself, let's say we do this retreat, someone like comes to this retreat,
Oh, we're
and
not
they're
saying
like,
it. We're doing it for
well,
sure.
no, we're doing it. Like, but in the hypothetical of us doing this retreat, not hypothetical that we're going to do it, but if you happen to show up,
Yes, there we go. Okay.
you show up and you're like, okay, well, this is a new thing for me. I'm tapping into parts of my sexuality that are different. Maybe my, maybe, maybe this will be the thing that I'll share with my partner as a thing that deals with the mating captivity problem, but maybe not, but you can still kind of go on your own way and still keep your connection with this person and, maybe do what you're talking about. So I just wanted to be realistic about this,
Sure.
and just say this is like a deep set of problems, and I can very easily imagine people trying to solve this in different ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm cool. Does that
Sounds
seem
good to
good to
me.
you? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay,
Perfect.
so we did it.
We did
So I
it. Yeah.
guess next episode we'll talk about patriarchy.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think, practicality, little G&T practicality here.
That's it, man. Capricorn in a building.
Hmm. 10th house for me,
10th house. It
Capricorn
isn't
house.
isn't right now something about Pluto moving out of something into somewhere else? I don't know. Today on the 19th.
Oh yeah, it's getting close. Yeah, people are like, it's moving into Aquarius, right?
Yes,
And you were
yes,
asking me
exactly.
about that. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. Does
Yeah,
that
yeah,
mean anything?
yeah.
Okay, cool, good, perfect. Glad we got that taken care of.
Well, it takes a while for Pluto to get from one sign to another,
Okay.
and it's moving into Aquarius. And Aquarius is kind of a very, it's an air sign, so it has an intellectual quality, but it has a radical and rebellious quality to it.
And what is
You know?
Pluto rep and Pluto moving? What is Pluto bringing as it moves?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't we brought it up and I kind of semi thought about it, but then I didn't.
Oh, okay. All
But
right.
Pluto has symbolisms that are kind of across. I was talking with some students about this too,
Sure.
and Pluto has like its sort of different symbolisms. For us in the tantric world, it probably has the meaning of like working with some of the more intense sexual energies. It has some of that connotation, right? Kundalini. It's a fire and water kind of a vibe to it, right? And so it can get into some of those things, the more intense experiences of sexuality. Some of the deeper, more intense experiences of psychospiritual connection are kind of represented there too.
Yeah.
And maybe this will be happening in more unconventional ways if it gets affected by Aquarius.
Mm,
Fingers crossed for our podcast,
yeah.
that would be a positive version of it. But Pluto also has some, I mean, all the planets have potential negativities, but it has a little bit more negativity, so it has obviously connotations that have to do with, like death, right? You know, so it has potentials that can be a little bit more destructive.
Mm,
So there's some, maybe potential volatility in that, right? As we
hmm.
see how the world is kind of unfolding. Uh, on a personal level, it has associations with sort of like obsessive qualities, especially jealousy, possessiveness. One of the myths of Pluto is he stole Demeter and like kept her in the underworld, right?
Mm.
So it has some of the darker psychological aspects, shadowy things that
Sounds
people
like
have
he
to
was a
look
naughty
at.
boy.
He's a complicated character.
Okay.
He's Hades, right? Yeah. Um, and then, on the different part, and this will be interesting to see how this plays out. I like some of these Chinese astrologers, and they'll talk about Pluto associated with like power, authoritarianism, and big business. So whether those things are going to be challenged or what's going to happen with that. But obviously, the United States is showing weird stuff with this, right?
Weird, yeah. And we're
On the
not.
one hand, there's like a union of like, we're going to be radical, we're going to be whatever, but it's joining with like big business, the
Right.
Elon Musks and the Donald Trumps and what the fuck is that?
Yeah.
So that does have some connotation in that, right?
Yeah.
The authoritarian big business power aspects, ugly totalitarian authoritarian aspects of this.
Mm.
they call out, then joining in with these Aquarian things. It's almost like a strange combination and kind of like a masquerade or something. It does feel that way, doesn't it? It
For
feels
now, yeah.
false. Feels false. So, but hopefully there'll be blowback against this. But there's a weird melding of like pretend radicalism and like big business. What
Yeah.
the fuck is that? Doesn't make any sense at all, does it?
No. No.
No, it's
Co-op,
completely
co-opted.
diluted. Yeah, it's
It's
co-opted.
co-opted for
Yeah, it's
right now.
completely
Yeah.
diluted. So I wonder what that's going to be. With
Okay.
that has weird vibes to it to me.
Well,
And I was thinking about that.
we don't do a ton of astrology. So there you go, folks. For those of you who stayed till the end, you got an astrology bonus
Yeah.
based on the astrological movements. And it's today. Today is the day that its first
Yeah, the
day.
19th, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So very apropos of us, Eric. Amazing,
There
outstanding.
is like a vibe in the air though. You feel something. And it like Pluto's a pretty strong planet in my chart. It doesn't feel totally negative to me, but I mean
Okay.
there's weird connotations. Again, I mean going back again. This whole Donald Trump Elon Musk thing is really weird, isn't it? But let's not dwell on it
We're not going to
at the
dwell
end of
on
an
it,
episode.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
sorry. I went back to it again. It's just so
That's
disturbing.
okay.
Anyways,
Yeah, yeah, it's
yeah.
all good. But so there you go. So for those who made it to the end, thank you so much. You are in the top 5% of attention havers in the world, in the universe, even I could say, because we're not sure who else we work with or is even alive to listen to this. But if you're listening from another planet or another universe or a different time, hello. And feel free to like, comment, subscribe, hit us up, ginandtantra@gmail.com. We got the gram popping at Gin and Tantra Podcast. If you know us personally, feel free to send us a text message or even a phone call or a FaceTime or a Zoom or what else there's Skype. I'm not sure. Microsoft Teams, whatever.
WhatsApp.
Yeah, WhatsApp, do all the things. Hit us up on all the damn things. TikToks, I don't even use it, but find me there, and make me an account and then send me messages on it. Anyways, Eric, always fun
Thanks,
as
Daniel.
forever. Yes. To our audience, thank you so much for listening. Thanks for hitting us up. Thanks for sharing our work. And just as a reminder, do those things that I just asked you, that I just thanked you for. And for Eric, this is Daniel. We'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.